The presenting sponsor of Moon Tower Soccer is FVF Law.
To find out what makes FVF a different kind of injury law firm, you can visit fvf.law.
Hello, friends, and thanks for listening to Moon Tower Soccer. This week, we're going to review Austin's 1-1 draw versus Atlanta, the 0-0 draw versus Vancouver, and then we'll talk about some player rumors, both incoming and outgoing. We'll preview the two matches this week, and then we'll cover some other Austin FC news. My name is Landon, and I'm joined, as always, by Mr. Jeremiah Bentley.
Hey, everybody. I'm Jeremiah Bentley. I think, Landon, when we were talking off air right before recording this, you talked about this being a week where all the soccer things happened in a way that is sometimes hard to keep in order, and they continue to come. And I don't remember a month like this month for this club. Maybe we have had them like this, but I mean, it seems like Wednesday, Saturday, nonstop, which becomes a lot for those of us that create content for the show on a regular basis.
Yeah, Mike and Steph were talking about that last week on Swoon Tower, that people talk about how difficult it is for the players to play this many games, but won't you think about the podcasters?
Right.
Like, I really hate weeks like this when trying to come in as someone with moderate to severe ADHD, trying to keep all these things straight in my head. I struggle on these weeks. So listeners, bear with us. We're going to do the best we can, but it's too much soccer for the players and for everybody.
Yeah, there's going to be a quote from John Gallagher, I think we'll get into later, about basically like, was it the post game? He's like, I'm tired. I'm probably dehydrated. Don't really want to spend a lot of time answering questions. And while luckily I'm not dehydrated from doing what I do, like you can see how that kind of builds up and how they feel when you have this run of games. And like this week you talked about already, like there's two draws too. So there's also, you get two of the same kind of game. So, I mean, maybe we just go ahead and get into that and talk about the things that happened this week. One thing I realized that we did not do, because I know Phil West at Verde All Day did, and we have done in the past when we've talked about these difficult runs of matches for this club, is give some kind of predictions, right? And like, is 16 points in May good for you, or is 12, or like what should we consider success or failure? We did not do that. I'm happy because we're always very wrong and never want to go back and look at it. But this week was really, really close to being a 4-point week, which I think we have to agree.
I'd say
if that had happened,
close to being a 6-point week.
Yeah, almost a 6-point week. But on the scoreboard, like easy 4. Like if this is a 6-point week, I feel like the details all of a sudden are crystallized in your head and they're a little bit less fuzzy, right? But yeah, Austin looks like the better team in both these matches. Has the lead in Atlanta almost completely throughout, like all the way into extra time. Drops that at like I think 90+2. I guess before that goal happened, how are you feeling on Wednesday night at home? Like, you feel a sense that Austin's going to come out ahead in this? Like, are they cruising to the win? To me, it felt a little bit like Austin got a little bit careless, particularly in defense, and that while that it wasn't a complete shock that this goal comes. Do you see like, is it a fluke, or is that like kind of the way the game was going?
I think in both of these games, once the subs came on, it started to look really disjointed for stretches. Not entirely, but there just seemed to not really be the understanding between players at all times, and they were having to think about some things. And then also just a little bit of legs, I think, as well. We'll talk about where I saw that in a couple of these goals, but the Atlanta one, I mean, Atlanta was not good on that night. Austin should have been able to do more than what they did and just failed to, from not being sharp enough. It didn't help. Atlanta sat super deep. As soon as Austin got the ball, they didn't even pretend to press for most of the game. They're just instantly crammed down into a super tight block in their own half. And that always makes it harder. It's a hard thing to play against, but Austin didn't really do themselves any favors by the way that they played for most of the game. So I didn't feel great about that game, period, but I thought, okay, we're at least going to get this win, and then they didn't do it. The other game was kind of the other way around, where I felt really good about the game, but was convinced and just preparing myself for the fact that Vancouver was going to score at the end of the game and we were going to lose it.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty fair summary. I mean, I guess we talked last week about how things might go, this week against Vancouver, given how bad it was on the road. But I mean, Austin plays his game for sure, right? Austin I think his shots were like 15-5 against Vancouver. I think Vancouver had like 0.2 in X goals. Like, it's total shutdowns.
Stuver's save of the
Austin
week, as selected by the Austin FC media team, was a Sebastian Berhalter shot that hit him in the chest and he caught it.
Yeah.
Like, that's his save. He had 2 saves in the whole game.
Yeah. So, and this after the Vancouver game, Nico was really positive in a way that I think people agreed with, whereas maybe they haven't always been before. They talked about this team is able to perform against the best team in the West, maybe the best team in the league right now. People are giving a lot of praise to Vancouver, how good they are, and they came in here and we were able to do what we did. So
I liked the end of that. I didn't see them today. I saw one team.
I saw one team. Well, I thought I'd leave that for you. It's a very Nico kind of thing, which we've not maybe gotten as much of, like Nicoisms lately, but I know we did early on, especially before the season started. So yeah, that one is, everything almost works, and it's just like a couple of bad bounces, and we will be looking at a very different week from Austin. I mean, the net sum of this offensively is Austin plays 2 matches, picks up 1 goal. I believe that DC United in 2010 had the lowest offensive output in league history. I mean, I guess excluding the COVID season, which was like half a season, but like in a full season has the lowest output. And Austin now stands either 2 or 3 goals behind that pace that DC had in 2010. And the narrative has to continue to be on that front that this is a team that has spent a whole bunch of money on the front line. I don't even think we need to summarize how much Austin spent in the attack over the last 10 months now or so. I mean, how much of this is by design? Because it feels like a little bit like we get a different approach every week, which I think coming away from sort of the rigidness of the Josh Wolf era, people probably appreciate Nico's adjustments from match to match to try to find the best 11, but it seems like maybe it's to the detriment of this offense at some point too.
Yeah, I think you could maybe say that the first little stretch of the season up until that first Vancouver game, that it was by design to a certain extent, because we were not even pretending to be a possession team at that point. We were defending really stingily and then trying to play in transition. I think at that point you can say it's by design. Since that Vancouver game, that has not been the case. This team is trying to keep the ball a little bit more. They're not trying to only keep the ball in possession at all costs. They are playing more vertically at times and changing that up a little bit, but trying to keep more of the ball. They're getting more chances and they're still just not finishing them. And so I don't think it's entirely by design for the whole season, and almost certainly not by design at this point. And I think the one thing, and maybe this sounds hypocritical coming from an Austin fan who was around during 2022, but all we heard from the national media was that overperforming your expected goals by this much can't be sustainable. Yet Austin sustained it for most of a season. I would like to believe that underperforming your XG by this much is also not sustainable. Hopefully we don't sustain that run as long as we did the opposite in 2022.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because if you looked at it the same way, objectively, Austin would have more goals. So you have to, so I guess if Driussi was a magical finisher, that means that at this point, it feels like Mirto Ozuni is a dramatically poor finisher. It feels like, or maybe Bukari too, but yeah, Austin has definitely not come through on the goals that one would think they would have. And I mean, I keep think about getting down on this, but it's still early, right? We're still just a little over the third of the way through the season. So you would hope that Austin would find some way to connect better along the front line going forward. But every match that it doesn't happen, it gets a little bit more frustrating.
Yeah, I want to go back to something you said about consistency of what's expected of the players or what the game plan is. I do really like the fact that Nico Estevez and his staff are looking at the opposition and making adjustments to what they do based on playing style or personnel or anything. And he's not just saying, yes, we're looking at the opposition and making changes. He'll tell you what they are if not before the game, after the game. He'll say, yeah, we saw them doing this, so we wanted to do this. And I love that he's giving us that amount of information. And I love that he's actually consuming that information and then making adjustments based on it. But I also understand the argument where, okay, yeah, make adjustments, but don't change things so drastically from game to game that it's hard for players to get into a rhythm. And I think one of the biggest ones for me is Osman Bukari is a different player when he plays on the left-hand side. And hopefully that's the last we've seen of that experiment, and they just play him on the right, because he was a monster against Vancouver. That young fullback that had to defend him for the first half is probably having nightmares about him to this day. But when he's on the left, he just wants to get on his right foot, and it's just unnatural for him to do it from that position. And so I think there are certain things that, yeah, make those adjustments, change your game plan depending on who we're playing. But there's a few things that should just be like, okay, this is where this guy needs to be. Make other changes around that, but this can't change.
Yeah, if he continues to play like he did against Vancouver, then he's just like demands that spot, and then you do work around him, like you just said. And this is the difference between me watching a game live in the stadium and me watching a game on the replays on Saturday night when I'm having a couple beers and kind of talking to people and yelling and chanting and stuff. I'm like, it seems like that guy had a pretty good game. And then I went back on Sunday and watched, and it's like almost every dangerous moment that Austin has, Osman Bukari is in the middle of it. So, yeah, great performance from him. Hopefully we continue to see more of that. To your point, hopefully we continue to see this consistency in attack and from the way that Nico lines him up.
Should we take a break, Jeremiah?
Yeah, let's take a break and get into this week and next week and all the other things that are happening around Austin FC land.
All right, hang tight. We'll be right back. Moon Tower Soccer is brought to you by our friends at FEF Law, the official injury lawyers of Austin FC.
FEF is a different kind of personal injury law firm dedicated to community, transparency, and client education. And they have their own podcast called Summary Judgment. You can check it out wherever you get your podcasts.
You can go to FEF.law to find out what makes FEF a different kind of injury law firm and why understanding your legal options can dramatically change the outcome of a case. Once again, that's FEF.law. Amplify Credit Union is a member-owned financial cooperative that served the needs of Central Texans for over 5 decades. As a credit union, Amplify has no shareholders or parent companies. That means more of your money stays in the community.
Amplify has been the home of fee-free rankings since 2022. Their free checking accounts come with 0 overdraft fees or minimum balances. That means Amplify's fee-free checking accounts help you get more mileage from your everyday spending.
Amplify membership is open to any Texas resident. Learn to trust your banking and Amplify Credit Union. To learn more and to register for free parking at the Amplify Esperanza branch on game day, go to www.goamplify.com/moontower-soccer. All right, we are back. Like we said before, we've got a lot to get through, so we're going to do our best to cover everything. But let's start off with the Atlanta United match midweek. Jeremiah, what were the pregame narratives for this one?
One thing we talked a lot about last week was Nico talking about starting the best 11 and whether that meant like the best 11, like FIFA style, no matter what, or if it was just the best 11 to win each individual match and stuff. I feel like what we got out of this one, and in the match on Saturdays, he really means they're taking it one game at a time, right? And kind of, Saturday be damned with the lineup that he sent out on Wednesday night. But like, we're going to try to win this one. We're not going to save people for the weekend. I think it's what we saw. And then, okay, so you talked about your hair during the break. Is this the first appearance of, in real life, Landon's green hair? Was this match?
Yeah, it was this Wednesday match. And between Wednesday and Saturday going into the stadium, we've talked about how we started posting video clips to Instagram. I feel like I get recognized at the stadium more often. I think you've said the same thing. The Wednesday and Saturday is the most times that anybody has said something to me in the stadium, just because probably they're like, I think that's him, but I'm not sure. But there's no doubt this time they all knew who I was.
That's awesome, man. So as I mentioned, we talked about how we would see the best 11. So on Wednesday night, it's actually could be not that different from Saturday. Stuver at the back, Biru, Cascante, Svatak, and Gallagher. In defense, Sabovic, Sanchez, and Wolf. In the midfield, and Bukari, Vasquez, and Uzuni up top, as you mentioned. We will get into the differences between where Osman Bukari plays and how he performs. I think this is one of the big talking points of this week, but that's where he starts out. And then let's maybe get into some chances and some game highlights.
Yeah, talking about the offensive shape and where they were, I think this is an interesting place to start with this game because it wasn't just that Bukari was on the left, but it was almost I struggle to put a title or like a numbers on what formation they were playing because oftentimes Gallagher would push up high and Biru would stay fairly deep, almost like a 3-man back line. And then Ilie and Sabovic were pretty quick to kind of drop back into that back line at times. And then Owen Wolf was often staying over to the right, but it was not really a back five, but it was also not the 4-3-3 shape that we've kind of seen more often than not in this attacking shape. So I think that probably led to some of the discomfort that the players were playing with, but also, like I said before, Atlanta was just playing super deep. And so I think Estevez knew going into this one that the main threat, like with this Atlanta team being as poor as they have been in recent games, with the lackluster midfield that they have on the team, the main way and maybe the only way that this team is going to hurt you is getting Almiron and Latte Loth on the break in transition. And so I think Estevez said, we're just not going to let him do that. So they didn't push numbers forward. They stayed pretty reserved. And they were trying to play guys into channels to find space in behind that way instead of pushing numbers up, finding overloads wide and playing that way and risking opening yourself up for transition. And it mostly worked. There's a few times where it didn't. And one of them, this is kind of a fluke one, but I think you can say this is a transition moment where you know why they're so dangerous and they can still be dangerous as bad as they've been, is this Almiron chance in the 8th minute. It comes from an Austin corner, so it's not quite a true counterattack moment, but the corner gets played in, gets headed out. Bukari is tracking back towards his own goal, like back towards midfield, tries to head it into Gallagher's path back towards goal so he can drop it back to Stuver, but which seems, I think if you look at where the Atlanta players are around him, it's maybe a bad idea anyway, but then he also executes it really poorly. And so he heads it, and it does not go ahead of Gallagher, but behind him, and bounces off of Gallagher's heel, falls to maybe Moranchuk or one of their midfielders. He immediately just chips a little ball in behind for Almiron to run onto. And Almiron's very fast, and Gallagher was still trying to spin around to catch him. And so Almiron is off to the races. He's going to get a 1v1 shot with Stuver. John Gallagher does a really good job to recover and get close enough to him to get some contact, make him think about him. But I want to talk about Brad Stuver here. I think he did really well with his positioning. You can't see him in the replay for the whole time, but I'd imagine he was standing quite high. And as that ball is coming back towards him, he then starts backpedaling towards his goal, probably to make sure Almiron doesn't try to chip him. And then, so he's backpedaling. As soon as Almiron takes that last touch, that's about the moment when Gallagher reaches him as well. And then Stuver starts coming back towards Almiron and is going to close that angle for when he's going to take that shot. So credit to Gallagher for getting there, knocking him off balance, closing off the angle a little bit. But Stuver does really well to kind of play that mind game with, okay, I'm backing up, final touch, boom, I'm on you. And then he's able to close it down and block that shot. So that, and one other Atlanta chance, though, that is the only real chances they had. I think if you look through their list of shots, the vast majority of their XG is made up by this chance and the last chance that they scored on. And the rest of them are all like 0.05 or something like that, like a lot of very low numbers when you're looking at their shot record.
Well, and then late in the first half, Austin gets one of the best chances on the night. This Uzuni shot that he gets, that Guzan happens to get to, and this continues this sort of frustrating trend of Mitchell Uzini getting good spaces, sometimes making good decisions and taking good shots, sometimes not, but still the results are not coming.
Yeah, was this an Owen Wolf through ball?
Yes, it was.
Yeah, that was a really pretty pass. This was kind of more so for the Vancouver game. We'll talk about that more later, but I thought the shot choice from Uzuni was fine. He, instead of trying to like whip it and like hit it really hard, I think he tries to catch Guzan by taking like a slightly early shot to that near post, and Guzan just does well to get that foot down and gets a toe on it. So I mean, yeah, you can maybe still have higher expectations and expect him to finish, but at least we're getting shots on target now. Not as much in this one, more so in the Vancouver game. But I'm less frustrated with this take than others we've seen him have.
It's a very low bar for being okay. But so let's just so it's a halftime, it's 0-0. Let's go to this Brandon Vasquez goal, and I want to talk about just how it's maybe you feel about Brandon Vasquez. I feel, we feel like there was some frustration early on. There's a couple goals in the El Paso match. There's like this early when he has his first PK and like it looks bad, and later on he's like he gets better, and I feel like this free kick is one where like, oh, this is the guy that we all got excited about and paid a bunch of money for, and it's just like in the moment, and maybe I'll take this back and regret it if he like doesn't score in the next 6 matches, but like at this point in time, I'm like, that's the guy, that's the dude we all hoped he would be, and it feels like that was a good use of our funds, and like this is a player that can be really successful again in this league and that we can build around.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really great free kick. It's, I don't know, 25, 30 yards out, fairly central. Guzan's able to get some fingers on it, but it's placed so well and hit so hard that he can't keep it out. But yeah, you're right. This is the kind of play a difference maker needs to make every once in a while, and he did it in this moment. There's not a ton of other huge chances, and still not a ton. So the subs come late in this one and in the Vancouver game.
Yeah, both of these they're even later in Vancouver. I think they're like 82 or something, but they start at 79 here. It seems like an odd choice on the night, given the weather, given how much people had run. This quote from Estevez says, "I wanted to build a momentum after the first goal. It was very difficult for me to change because we were very close to scoring a second goal. But I went back and looked. I think there were only 2 shots that Austin took between the Vasquez shot and the substitution. So I don't know how close to the second goal that they were. Maybe they were really good in build-up, but it seems like this is a move that maybe could have come a little bit earlier. But then to your point on how Austin's looked disjointed when the subs come in, maybe you don't want them on the field, earlier on. Maybe you do want to run people as long as possible, even if they get leggy.
Yeah, it's like you talked about having the best 11 for each game, and that we're only thinking about this one. Both of these games, the Wednesday one and the Saturday one, felt like we have a chance to win this one. Like you said, Saturday be damned. Like, we're going to get these points and then worry about whatever happens after this. But it seems like a weird thing to do both games in a row. I understand where he's coming from. Like, there's not, if you look at the bench, there's some good players, but there's not anybody on the bench that's like, oh yeah, if we put him on, he's going to be absolutely going to be a big difference maker in this one. So I get where he's coming from. We'll get into this when we get into the previews, though. I think it does put him in a tight spot, or at least make some decisions for him when picking that best 11 for the next game. It almost certainly can't be the same one it was in this game.
Right. I mean, that's something we didn't talk about in the pregame this time because the status really hasn't changed very much. But you're looking at Denny Ferreira, Robert Taylor, Mikael Dessler being unavailable. That's a lot of, if you were to look to the bench, if these guys weren't starting, like, those are players that can change games. Or if they're starting, there are other people that you can bring on that can change games. So to be fair, like, he is limited, but you'd like to see more.
Yeah, so the rest of the game plays out. I mean, again, Austin was not inspiring a lot of confidence in me, but Atlanta was really bad on this
Yeah.
night. And so I was like, okay, we're not looking great, but at least Atlanta's looking worse. So maybe we can hold on to this one and scrap it out. But there is some really frustrating play, some really frustrating decisions by the players on this one. Not winning balls, like balls would be kicked long, or goal kicks, or just clearances would get hit long, and we'd let them bounce too much or play really soft headers into like clever positions. And against a team who's only looking to hit you on the break like that, like don't tempt it. Don't give them the satisfaction of thinking they can get to that ball and win it. Like, get ahead on it first bounce, win it early. Don't try to be cute. Don't try to be clever in those risky moments when you know those are the only moments they're counting on in this game. And so just so many times, I feel like Svatak did it a couple times, Gallagher did it a couple times, but there are several people guilty of it in this one where they just seemed like the heat was getting to them, and they didn't want to go in and go shoulder to shoulder with someone. It's like, I'll just let it bounce and try to win the next one. And it just let Atlanta stay in the game much longer than they had any right to be.
Yeah, and so Atlanta does get this one at, I think, what was it, 6 minutes of extra time that they were allotted in this one. It doesn't matter terribly much because this comes in 2 minutes after, sort of the dagger tying goal here that will lead this to being knotted at 1-1.
Yeah, so this one, I don't remember how it gets back to Guzan. Maybe Austin plays it longer, there's a clearance back or something, but Guzan ends up with the ball. Austin is kind of half pressing, half not. And so our attackers and midfielders are around or past the midfield line, but then our back line is a little bit deeper. And so there's this big pocket that Guzan can just drop a ball into for Jamal Tiare, who they'd subbed off Latte Loth. Latte Loth is a smaller striker, but very fast, very dynamic. And so there's a lot of balls earlier on where they would lump him long. And I think they're probably hoping that it can get through and he can get onto the end of it and use his speed to beat Austin. That almost never happened with him. They put in Tiare, and on this one, he's a big guy, and he gets into a wrestling match with Cascante as it drops into that space and is able to get on the end of it, knock it back for Almiron, who's rushing on from the midfield. And our midfielders don't recognize it enough or aren't getting on their horses fast enough. But this is kind of what I referenced earlier with the subs kind of disjointing things, plus the guys who didn't get subbed just being very tired. But Ilie is not far from Almiron this whole time, but either doesn't clock it fast enough or just doesn't get on his horse and doesn't get there fast enough. And so Almiron runs past him, picks up that ball that Tiare knocks down, and then he chips the ball over the top. And to Saba Lobjevenice, I probably put too many letters in that one. He just kind of chips the ball over the back to him. Biru is holding the offside line, but Svatak is like 4 yards deeper than him for whatever reason and keeps Saba onside. And so there's a few breakdowns here that, again, just like this lack of sharpness, lack of fight in key moments that kind of comes back to bite Austin. But Saba gets it, takes a touch towards goal, squares it to Tiare, and he taps it in. I think there's some controversy around this one, at least from Austin fans, thinking that this one should have been called offside.
Yeah, it was on the Tiare touch, right? Like, I mean, for me, like, I don't see where he's being kept onside there. And I think Nico Estevez also had, I think maybe even the conspiracy theory take on it afterwards. I'm not really sure, but yeah, I felt like it was one of those where everybody throws their hand up to, right, and calls for offside, which happens all the time. So like, you can't put a lot of credit in that in terms of the Austin players' reaction, but it seemed questionable for me, and I never did go back and watch like a really solid angle to know whether I'm right or not.
Well, you couldn't have anyway because there's not a solid angle.
Okay, well, no, good.
The best one there is still really hard to tell, and it looks like he's maybe offside, but also he's the one on the near side of the field from where that camera angle is, and there's
Just
always
distortion there.
yeah, there's always going to be some eye tricks going on that I tried to posit exactly where Saba plays the ball and trying to look at where Tiari's foot is in that moment. And without the right angle, it's impossible to say. So I think this is one of those that whatever the call on the field was going to stay because there's not a good enough camera angle to overturn it on the review. And that's exactly what happened. It was very tight. If he was offside, it was not by much. And so it was not egregious. It was not the only reason he was going to score that one. So I don't feel as hard done by here. I think the Austin players should have just done better.
Well, that's true to a fault. And I don't know if you read Phil Westlake's Verde All Day article last week where he talked through all the goals that Austin had give up and sort of like assign blame. And most of them were to team as opposed to individuals. I feel like this goal here, that was a team goal. Many guys could have done something differently. And I feel like this is something that we haven't complained about this year, so we should go back to it. Apple TV is paying a bunch of money. Like, let's get some decent angles. What are we doing with this cash that we're getting for Apple where we can't get like a good angle of an offside?
Yeah. I've heard people give the answers, and the answer is money, that they don't
they don't want to spend,
it or don't think they can spend it, especially in places like Yankee Stadium or like in where they're not the primary tenant and there's an NFL team or whatever. Like, you can't just go installing all these cameras for certain things. So I understand it. It's still very frustrating.
Right. I guess, player notes wise, I feel like we talked about Bukari, and on Wednesday I was ready to lead the sort of opening of the show with what's going on with Osman Bukari. Why isn't he good? Why does he not connect with anybody else? And why isn't he playing the right position? Then Saturday came, and I feel like I had to take a lot of those takes back, or at least temper some of those. We also talked about John Gallagher being dizzy and dehydrated, but he's still going to go again on Saturday. But like, what other player notes do you have from this one before we move on to the Vancouver match?
I think, I think I'm good here. I think a lot of the notes could be in contrast between these two games, and we can kind of make those contrasts and comparisons during the Vancouver recap.
Okay, well, before we do that, because we always forget this, Brendan Vasquez does make team of the match day for that killer goal. And it's like we should call it out and note that, because that's always a good thing to have from somebody, especially one of your offensive players. So let's go on to Vancouver. So seems like some guys might be spent after the long night on Wednesday. We know that there's a possibility we get rotation. We know that Vancouver blew Austin out in Vancouver not too long ago, and it seemed like there was not a lot going on to make one believe that Austin would change that narrative, especially when Austin comes off this sort of underwhelming result, at least, if not underwhelming performance, against Atlanta United.
Yeah, talking about would we see rotation, one of the players I was most concerned with in this really congested stretch of fixtures is Besar Savovic. We've seen signs of fatigue not super late into games from him, like 50, 60th minute at times, and he looks like he's already struggling. But he goes 85 against Atlanta and then plays the full 90 against Vancouver. And I think there's some things you could criticize in both of the games, but I thought in the Vancouver one, he mostly had a really good game and then had stretches of playing quite well in the Atlanta game too. And so maybe he's finally found his Texas legs, so to speak, and is not struggling so much from the heat. But he did fairly well and was able to kind of keep up the energy for most of those games.
Yeah, so lineup-wise, we see almost the exact same lineup as on Wednesday. I think the difference being center backs, right? We get Brendan Hines-Ike back to replace Julio Cascante. Then Bukari and Uzzini flip sides. And that's basically it, right? As far as the changes?
Personnel wise, yeah. And then the shape on this one, though, was substantially different from what I saw. This one looked to me, we'll call it a 4-3-3, but I think it maybe requires a bit more explanation as to what we were actually seeing, because the midfield three was often more of like a 2-1, where Savovic and Ilie were sitting deeper in a double pivot, and Owen was playing a bit more like a true 10. And generally favoring one side, but definitely playing further forward than both of those other guys, and Ilya and Savovic playing much deeper for most of the game. So that was a little bit of a wrinkle. That was maybe the thing that like I was asking for in the last game, where Owen may not be a true 10, but I think we have to start treating him like one. And that was one of my frustrations from the Atlanta game is, yeah, Atlanta was sitting deep, but you still have to make some brave passes every once in a while and try to play into tight spaces. And I think Savovic played Owen one time into a pocket just outside the box, and he was able to make a little half chance out of it. But it's almost like we didn't even try another time. And so it seemed like this shape was set up a bit more to give him more freedom to go from side to side and play closer to goal. And then also putting Bukari back on that right-hand side. But it was, I know a lot of times you'll see that called a 4-2-3-1. And I'm hesitant to say that either, because the wingers were not playing as quote unquote midfielders. They're staying quite high for most of the game.
Yeah, I think so. Then you call it a 4-2-1-3 or something. Not that it really matters, but I think one of the things talking about Owen, and I know we shouldn't read too much into FotMob or other website player ratings, because they're all generated from metrics and like not anybody seeing anything. But yeah, he got like a way higher rating on the Wednesday match than the Saturday match. And I think he was like the lowest rated player on the team on the Saturday match. And I don't know that I saw anything from him that makes me think he was like the worst player on the field for Austin that night.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I've complained about FotMob and believing the numbers too much. It's like, it is an algorithm. Nobody's watching these games giving scores. So like I could, if I, Landon Cottam, lay down in the penalty area and do not move for the entire match, and somebody bounces 2 balls off of me and they go in for goals, I'm going to get an 8-point rating.
It's fair.
That's how these algorithms work.
Okay. Okay, that's fair. But so I think generally on the night, we kind of teased this in the opening. Austin, more shots on target, more ex-goal by far. The team that was being more aggressive, even though Vancouver had more possession. And so I'm interested in your take on the difference in the styles of play between the two matches, other than like Atlanta being bad and therefore Austin having a lot of the ball and Vancouver being a team you had to watch out for. So Austin like playing more of the counter. But what did you see out of the flow of this game that looked different from what we saw on Wednesday night?
Yeah, Austin was pressing for a lot of moments in this game. They weren't always pressing high, but Vancouver seemed intent on playing out of the back whenever they had a goal kick. And Austin, for the most part, did quite well in those moments and really forced Vancouver into playing some really poor passes and turning over the ball pretty needlessly. And I think that bears out in the stats, where you see how few shots they had, how few real solid chances they had throughout the whole night. So I thought that was one area where they did really well, and just the organization between the midfielders and the forwards to really close off those gaps. And there's a lot of strategy there. It's not just run fast, try hard. Like passing players off and knowing where they want to go and making sure they can't play those easy balls through the middle. There's a lot of strategy, and I think the players did really well for most of this game on that end. And then the opposite way, Vancouver, they generally like to put pressure on you as well. And I think Austin handled it well. They were playing quicker than they do in a lot of games. Still not always as quickly as I want. But overall, like, this is one of the better games Austin has played this year, in my opinion. They still didn't finish the chances, but I think this one comes down less to just like fluffing easy chances and not even putting them on frame. This one is more, okay, creating some good chances, turning some kind of moments that don't seem dangerous into half dangerous chances and putting some good shots on target and asking the question, forcing saves, doing that. And Austin was able to do that over and over in this game. Again, they didn't go in, but they are asking the question.
Yeah, and I think if you're going to look at, but when we get into key moments, I think you just sort of tease it. Like Takaoka also had a really good night, the Vancouver keeper. And I think both the websites I looked at had him as the player of the match. And it seemed like a very fair place for him to be. So if you're not going to score, like not scoring because the keeper's making big saves is the best way to do it rather than squandering your own opportunities.
Yeah. Let's get into some of the chances in this one. So Austin gets an early one. Brendan Hines-Ike header off of corner in the 4th minute. Bukari roasts his defender for the first time of the night and wins a corner. Owen puts in a ball. Hines-Ike, I don't know how intentional this was, but he's kind of like the pick man that other guys are running off of. And as that's happening, all the defenders chase the guys who are running, and he just turns around and the ball lands on his head for an open header. So maybe, I don't know if it was, again, if that was intentional, maybe do that more. But that's the first one. Bukari has several more moments where roasting a guy, getting an early cross in that barely misses a runner. Maybe the cross is a little high, a little too hot, but doing really well. And then gets tackled in the box in the 15th minute where Stuver plays a long ball. The bounce is a little awkward for the defenders, and Bukari is able to get onto it, push forward, pushes past Veselinovic into the box, and maybe shows a little bit too much of the ball, and the defender is able to put in a good tackle. There were some shouts for penalty there. After watching the replay, I think this was probably a clean tackle. But yeah, the chances start early, and then Savovic gets this free kick in the 17th minute where Ilie sets him up with a little quick touch to push a little bit wide. Then he hits it low and hard, hoping to catch the keeper blind, playing off the left side of that wall. A Vancouver defender gets a slight touch and puts it off target, but it goes straight into Vasquez's path. And this is probably one of the biggest wasted chances of the night, where some of the other ones, okay, good shot, the keeper saved it, what are you going to do? This one, Vasquez, it's a tough thing to deal with, especially off of the deflection, but he should have done better, where his first touch probably lets him down a little bit. And so instead of taking a touch to the inside where he can hit it with his right foot or play it back across goal, he accidentally lets it run on past his body, and then he just kind of has to throw a foot at it at that point and hope he can get good contact before it goes out of bounds, and mishits it. And I think it hits the side netting and doesn't even bother Takaoka. But if that first touch is cleaner, he's got a good angle to shoot, and then maybe he has a bunch of runners coming central as well that maybe, I don't know if he'll have time there, but could maybe square to one of those guys and have a tap in without a keeper there at all. But that was, one of the biggest letdowns of the night for sure.
And that one's one that ends up, I was just looking at the like shot by shot thing, and that's like half Austin's X goal in the night. And that's how X goal doesn't look at the situation, right? Because at the time he takes the shot, that is not a 0.6. There's not a 60% chance.
No, it's
that
a low
it's going to go in.
shot,
Yeah, it's a low percentage shot. But if you look at like exactly where he is and with his foot and where everybody else is, like it seems like a high percentage shot. But in the real world, it was not, because of the things that led up to it.
Yeah, it could have been a high percentage shot for sure. I want to take this next chance as an opportunity to talk about Svatak a little bit. So he plays a ball over the top in the 26th minute to Uzuni, kind of makes an interior curving run. I think it ends up not becoming anything, but just the ball and bringing it down was really good. And then Svatak hits a big through ball to Owen that breaks two lines of defenders in the first half. There's several moments that I think maybe this is recency bias and he hasn't always been this way, but I think we're maybe not giving him enough respect, Svatak, with his skill on the ball. Aesthetically, it doesn't look smooth or effortless the way that some players look on the ball, but he's got more art and deception than I would have guessed him capable of. With, okay, a ball gets played back towards goal, he'll give a little shoulder dip to make a defender hesitate for half a second, and then taking touches into space before he plays a pass. And then one of the most accurate players of long balls in the last few games. If you look at some of the long ones, several of them have been from him. So I don't know if this is just this one game, but I'm going to be watching him a little bit closer and trying to see if, like, I've been thinking he wasn't as good on the ball because it doesn't look pretty, or if he just played super well in this game and it's recency bias.
Yeah, well, or hopefully, like he's learning this league, right, and he's growing into what he can be. But yeah, we think about lots of awesome players from Austin's past, and the ones that look like they're trying hard the all time or look a little bit awkward, and it's easy to sometimes dismiss what they can contribute as opposed to, like, I mean, when Julio plays offensively, like he looks like he belongs, and sometimes you're like, maybe he would have been a better target striker than a center back, right? But maybe not that extreme, but like, yeah, you don't get that vibe from Svatak. And I know from the national announcers, that's one thing that he always suffers with, is I feel like I keep hearing over and over again on the broadcast when those games are on the road about how like he's just a defensive piece and he can't do anything else. And so maybe like that's in everybody's heads too when people talk about him. But yeah, he did not have that kind of game on Saturday night.
I feel like he was also quite good defensively. If you look at some of the big plays that get cut out, big defensive, like individual performance moments, a lot of them are him. And so I think he deserves a lot of credit for this game. Moving on to more chances, there's the Bukari header in the 28th minute. Sabovic plays a little 1-2 back heel to send Biru through behind up that left-hand side. Biru's cross looks a little misplaced, but Bukari attacks it, gets up in the air, gets a strong header that forces a punch over the bar from Takaoka. And then in the 35th minute, the 35th minute, this is that one where Bukari gets to the end line and like fizzes that ball across the face of goal. But yeah, there's a cross into the box. Biru kind of heads it back across the other way into the box, into Bukari's path. He settles it with his chest as he's still running forward and gets to the end line and hits it really hard across the goal mouth. I don't know if he was shooting or if he saw the runners. Biru comes through and kind of flies into the goal trying to get a piece of it. But as fast as the ball was moving, they were going to have to meet at a very specific point in time, and that didn't happen. But I almost wonder if maybe he could take a little bit off of it. Maybe someone would have a little better chance of getting to it. But I think it's also a possibility that he was trying to score.
Yeah.
And then there's right before halftime, Bukari does put one in the back of the net, and it gets called offside. There's an Svatak. I just was praising his play on the ball. He plays a pretty awkward ball back to Stuver that Stuver has to kind of bring down with his head and then just launch a clearance upfield. Uzuni gets to it, heads the ball upfield towards Vasquez. Vasquez knows he's offside, so he just lets the ball run past him. Bukari sneaks behind that offside trap, picks up the ball, drives into the box, rounds the keeper, scores. But the flag goes up. I didn't see him in real time. I didn't know if he was offside or not. There's not a single camera angle that shows him offside, but if you look at where he is when he starts running, he is at a standstill and is not moving at all. So it's like, I think he's probably been in this location for quite a while, and that location is 10 yards offside.
Yeah, waiting the ball. Yeah.
It didn't count. Hopefully that was a good little confidence booster anyway, just to get some practice.
I mean, hopefully the whole night was for him. He had a super solid night.
So going into halftime, I mean, it was already clear by this point, Austin was the far better team in the first half. I think it was 8 shots to 2, 1 XG to 0.08, and 7 corners to 1, all in favor of Austin. There's several games this season where Austin has started off strong, or at least had a few good stretches or a few good chances early, couldn't put them in, and then the game changes. Either the energy shifts or a goal goes in and it changes the momentum of the game. So I go into halftime of this one feeling like, okay, Austin didn't get that goal. Vancouver's going to come out and turn it on, and this game is gone now. That's what I was fully expecting to happen. But Austin comes back out and maybe looks better in the first little stretch of the second half than they did for the whole first half. They were able to force several chances with some turnovers. I think right after halftime, Austin wins the ball a few times in a row in the press. And the last one is in the Vancouver 18-yard box. Bukari recovers it, lays it off for Sabovic at the top of the box. And this is the shot I saw him hit in the tape I watched of him in Sweden, where late arriving run at the top of the box hits a pile driver and it's right up the middle. So Takaoka just goes up 2 hands and punches it over the bar. If that's 2 or 3 feet to either side, that is a much tougher save to make and maybe a goal. So, I mean, again, frustrating that happened several times, but they are putting them on frame now. They are hitting balls cleanly, putting them on frame, forcing saves. Hopefully that is a stepping stone to the next step up, which is actually hitting the back of the net.
Yeah, it's baby steps, man. Yeah, on the night there was that, and then I guess I think one thing we have to talk about is pretty late after the subs come on. Again, we already talked about the substitution patterns and how Austin looked different, but the Bukari has another great chance. I think it's like 83, right? This one probably Austin's best chance of the second half.
Yeah, the Vancouver is able to get a little bit more momentum. I'd say like 60th, 70th minute, and are able to kind of get forward. They're throwing more numbers forward. Austin isn't able to sustain their press as much at that point. And there's not a ton of chances in this little gap, but then Austin does get a few chances later. And that best one that you're mentioning, it's Sabovic. Sabovic takes a free kick quickly to find Bukari over the top. He's kind of centrally, beats one man, gets a shot off, and forces a good save from Takaoka. But that there's maybe a couple of other half ones that I'm not thinking of, but that was kind of the last big one. And then, yeah, the game ends up 0-0, and Austin's not able to get a goal in a game where it really felt like they deserved one.
Well, I think given the competition, that's what makes the Atlanta one hurt so bad, right? We just, I guess, what we talked about in the Open. If you pick up that win against Atlanta, against a team that was clearly bad on the night and that Austin is better than, then you feel okay about. You feel more okay about this Vancouver match and not getting the result. And now Austin being, I think, now slipping down to 9th place, still -7 on goal differential. It's very much a moral victory that you take away from Vancouver. And like you can't get take as much out of the week because of the things that went wrong on Wednesday.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, I had someone at work, actually, it's someone at work who kind of follows Austin FC more casually than we do, but he saw the score and was asking me about the game. He said, that's a pretty good result to draw Vancouver, right? That, like, y'all are probably happy with that. I was like, I mean,
Yeah.
in a vacuum, maybe,
Yeah.
but they deserve to win it. They were the much better team. And so it's, yeah, you can take your moral victory, but you have to get these points at some point. And there's still time. The West, nobody wants to win in the West anyway. And so there's still a real possibility. Like, this is not a hopeful possibility. Like, if Austin can halfway find their way in the next month or so, they're right back in the playoff chase. They're right back maybe in the top 5 even. That's just what the Western Conference is like this year. But you have to start doing it at some point. And this is, yeah, this one just feels like a chance that slipped away when you had that game in your hands.
And I feel like this has been a theme of some past seasons that we're getting at again, where it's everything, they didn't go wrong, but like things didn't turn out the way we wanted them to in a different way, in 2 different ways, like in 2 different matches this week. Ultimately, it doesn't really matter because you don't get the big result, but it feels like Austin finds new and creative ways to not win.
Yeah. Before we move on, and Jeremiah, after I finish this, you can tell me if we need to cut it out.
Cool.
And I can edit this out of the show.
But I can already tell you the answer is no. Yeah, we're keeping it.
All caps on Warren Barton.
Awesome. Let's do it.
So whenever we're in the stadium, we of course don't hear the TV broadcasters. I went back and watched my replay and heard, okay, the main play-by-play guy, Mark Followell. Great. Love Mark Followell. I think he does a really good job. Joined today by Warren Barton. God damn. I find him so irritating. He's like the proper football man who played in the 90s back when they were still playing caveman football in England. And he seems to believe that that's how the game should still be played. And so that's one thing. That's okay. We see the sport differently. Fair enough. We can agree to disagree there. But his commentary also involves absolutely no context for anything that's happening in a specific season or for a specific team. He doesn't seem to do any research other than maybe reading a single Matt Doyle column in 2023. And when they were making the subs, he seemed really confused as to why they were subbing off Brandon Vasquez. I'm like, okay, yeah, if this is the only game you've watched and it's the only thing you know, then yes. But it never occurred to him that, okay, Brandon Vasquez has played over 400 minutes in May and still has 4 more games to play before the end of the month. Like, do you think that's maybe why they're subbing some of these guys off? Nope, never occurred to him. And so I know that MLS is a small world. That's why I wanted to give you the chance to say we should cut this out of the show.
No, I love it. Go for it. It's funny. I feel like Barton is one of those guys that is fairly polarizing, which, okay, so I will, in his defense, I mean, the man has a take. I feel like so many people that we hear on the broadcast have like a very vanilla, just like unstructured, dispassionate approach to what they're doing. Like, you may think he's very wrong, but he's not afraid to say how he feels about things.
He's very passionate about usually very lazy takes. And I was in this group chat with Kevin Morris, and I think the way that Kevin put it was like, he essentially just looks at a thing that went wrong on the field and passionately says, you see that thing they did bad? They should have done it different. Great analysis there, bud.
What's the old take? It's often wrong, never in doubt. I feel like that may be true for him.
Yeah, I wish like I could hand pick like 8 of the Apple TV talent and just have them do every game. I know that's not logistically feasible, but there are some really good ones that I really like, and I'm upset when we get the ones I don't like.
And we've managed to have like a lot of the good ones I like on the show, or that I think that we both like on the show. And so it's always good to find the guys who do care about doing their homework and do hang out after the recording's over and ask us questions about the team so that they're better at their job during the week. And you're right. It doesn't seem like everybody does that.
Yeah. Hopefully they let us do that again after this segment. Anything else on this game, Jeremiah?
No, let's take a break, go into some player rumors, and preview next week. Moon Tower Soccer is brought to you by Sage Wilson Realty. The Sage Wilson team is made up of Austin experts who are client-focused and have over 30 years of combined real estate experience. Our friends at Sage Wilson Realty are giving away 2 tickets to an upcoming match. You can fill out the form in the show notes for your chance to win.
If you or someone you know are in need of Sage Real Estate advice in Austin, talk to our friends at Sage Wilson Realty. Be sure to check them out online at sagewilson.com.
Our premier sponsor is McGuire Woods Consulting, helping clients in the public affairs space from lobbying at the local, statewide, and federal levels to digital and communications campaigns across the country.
McGuire Woods Consulting has offices in 10 MLS cities, but only supports this podcast because Austin FC is about to become
U.S. Open Cup champions.
Exactly. Maybe some other ones, but we'll decide if those trophies are relevant in the future.
Yes, retroactive assignment of value to trophies is what we excel in here.
Contact our friends at McGuire Woods Consulting at mwcllc.com for more information. All right, we are back. We are going to preview the Open Cup match versus the Houston Dynamo and then our first road trip to Minnesota of the year. But first, we have a few pieces of Austin FC news to cover, including one player reportedly potentially on the way out and another one reportedly potentially on the way in. Which one do you want to start with?
Well, let's start with the outs. This is Osman Bukari potentially out. Potentially that Red Star Belgrade wants him back. We saw those reports from a couple different places. It's one of those.
They seem to start in Serbia, though, right?
That's right. That's right. Yeah, they originated there. Yep, originated there, and then we got the classic rebuttal from the Bukari camp, which is like he's an Austin player and he's concentrating on Austin, which doesn't really answer the question either way or not.
But the report is that he Red Star, where he came from, where we paid a reported $7 million for him, wants to buy him back now or this summer, which I looked it up. I think the Serbian transfer window opens July 15th, which is a week or two before the MLS window opens up. And so we would likely still have him until this next window goes, if this happens, or if there's any truth to it at all. But it would be a weird thing to happen. Like, weirder things have happened, but it would be strange for them to sell him to us for a large amount of money and then turn around and say, actually, we want to buy him back immediately.
Yeah, I agree with that. And knowing the sources, it seems like a little bit of wish casting from the camp over there that maybe don't or aren't excited about him being sold and do want to have him back. But it seems odd. I would put this in the internet rumor versus something grounded in reality category of things if I had to pick right now.
Yeah, I mean, that came out before the Vancouver match. And so if there is any reality to it, you could say, okay, he's motivated to play to get that transfer, or maybe he's motivated to play really well so they don't transfer him out. I don't know. Anyway, yeah, after the match, We Are Austin TV posted a video of, I think it was Alex asking him questions in the locker room about this rumor. And Bukari essentially said, hey man, I'm an Austin FC player. I read this online the same as you did, so I don't have any inside info. It's between the clubs, but I'm an Austin player. That's what I'm focused on right now. So didn't full on deny it, but also didn't talk about it in the way that like he's pushing for it necessarily.
Yes, right. Which he'd have to be a part of that in order for him to make that move back. So then we got this rumor from an account with a whole bunch of followers, hundreds of thousands, that Nicky Beloko, Swiss, and is it Cameroon? He's a dual national. Yeah, might be coming in.
Yeah, this is from a pretty big publication in Switzerland. And then I think I saw that he's already following some Austin accounts and even maybe retweeted or posted one of these things to his stories about the reports of him signing. But there's a lot more concrete details here. Some of the publications in Europe even saying that it's done already, like he signed the pre-agreement and it's a 4-year contract. So this one seems a bit more real, to the extent that like I wouldn't be shocked if there's more and more smoke and this one does happen.
So you've watched a little bit about him play in some video. Like where do you see him lining up? So he's a midfielder. I think I've saw him called a defensive midfielder. I've seen him called like number 8 midfielder. Like what would you classify him as?
Yeah, so one of the frustrating things about guys coming from smaller leagues, and I'll say smaller, just like not one of the top 6 or 8, or really even like top 5 plus MLS. MLS has access, like we get access to quite a bit of data that a lot of leagues don't get, which is, we're fortunate for that. But the Swiss league doesn't have a lot of these really in-depth metrics where you can go on FBref and it'll give you that pie chart slice up of like, okay, he's really strong in this area. Like we don't have any of that for this guy. So it's some website saying defensive mid, and that's kind of all he had to work on. So went through and watched some film, all from this season. So maybe this is one of those Uzuni things where he's played other positions in different seasons, but this year for Lucerne, who he plays for in Switzerland, it was more of like an all-action number 8, where they played a shape that was kind of like a 4-3-1-2, and he was one of the wide players in that line of 3 midfielders, shuttling box to box. And so he would get forward and make runs and receive closer to goal, but was not expected to be the main playmaker in that area, and would also hustle back and be a real defensive presence when they were going the other way. In terms of dynamism and athleticism, I think Owen Wolff is the only midfielder who might be able to match him on that level. And I say might. like maybe he can't, because he's Beloko is listed at 6 feet tall, but has that, that explosiveness, that that acceleration that Owen has, and then that strength to be able to push guys off the ball. So he has all of that, but is a much bigger player. He is much more of a ball hawk than Owen as far as like closing down space, going to win balls. He is good in those areas, which I think is why he gets categorized as a defensive midfielder in broad strokes. Seems to probably be less technically talented than Owen also. And so I know we've talked about needing a creative player in the midfield to hopefully lift this team to another level. This guy ain't it. Like, this is not the one.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that has to concern people, although to admit we're just people that read things on the internet and not like professional scouts like Austin has, but if you just look at his numbers, this is an okay league. It's a team that is not one of the top teams in this league, and he does not have eye-popping stats, at that point in time. So then it becomes a question of like, what can we see from him? And knowing that Austin only has 2 senior roster spots and 2 international spots to use in the summer. And I think almost everybody would prioritize a center back and like an actual creative 10 in those 2 spots. I mean, what does this mean? Somebody's going out? Does this mean... I saw somebody speculate that he's an Austin FC2 player, which I do not believe that is a possibility, but where do you see him fitting into this club?
Yeah, I initially I was at work when this started happening on social media, and I was like, okay, maybe it is an Austin FC2 player, but looked up his resume and his age. He's above that level, but is also not going to be like at a TAM level. So I think my hope is, since it's going to be on a free transfer, he is currently out of contract, so we wouldn't have to pay anything for him. I looked up, and who knows how accurate this is, but like kind of average salaries of the Swiss league seem to be quite low. And so it would be great if we could bring this guy in on a supplemental roster spot and not have to use one of those senior spots. It would still be very likely we'd need to use an international roster spot on him, but maybe there's some green cards in the work to where, okay, we're going to use it this season, but we're going to have some more opening up in the next season. And it's fine. We don't need it right now. The other possibility, someone else is on the way out. So Owen Wolf keeps playing well. He's going to have more and more eyeballs on him. I'm sure there's going to be offers for him. Maybe the plan is to move him on. We've talked about Danny Pereira going out. That would open up some space to bring in someone else who you would still have, you could bring him in and still have a couple more senior roster spots. So I don't know what the answer is. I do not expect this guy to be terribly expensive. And I do not believe that Rodolfo Borrell thinks that this is the guy who's going to come in and really change this team. This seems like a play for the future. This is a Biru move. This is that level of player. It's like, okay, he's not played for the biggest teams, but still fairly young. I think he's 25 and has played at a decent level against some really good competition in Europe. So let's bring him in, get him on a cheap deal on a longer contract, and hopefully we can turn him into something.
Well, I think we should go from here to another rumor that I would attribute to being complete internet nonsense, except that Eric Goodman is the source of this. This is the Kevin de Bruyne to Austin move, or I guess move that will not happen, that might have happened, except for Austin doesn't have enough money or a designated player spot or actually do anything to meet the needs of the player, but he was interested in Austin. Is that a fair summary of it?
Yeah, what Eric Goodman from the Austin Chronicle reported is that there was contact between De Bruyne's camp and Austin, but Austin was not able to meet salary demands, which, yeah, we've got 3 DPs, unless De Bruyne is willing to come on a TAM contract, which from all the reporting around this move seems absolutely out of the question for him. He's not good enough friends with Messi to take that buddy deal like some of his other guys did. So, I mean, there's a lot of discussion about, is this complete nonsense? Eric, as to your point, Eric is not a guy who breaks stuff like this, but I know that he takes his job as a journalist serious enough that he would not make it up. And his track record is good on that from that standpoint. So I don't believe Eric's making this up. I also don't believe it necessarily means that Kevin de Bruyne was like, I want to go play for Austin, get me to Austin. I imagine his camp when, okay, this contract coming to an end, probably for the last year, they've been reaching out to a lot of people. And as you come into MLS, yeah, okay, let's cast a wide net. Which teams could possibly want this to happen? Okay, there's a connection to Burrell from the Manchester City days. Yeah, we'll call Roto, see if they're interested. And maybe, let's say Roto does say, yeah, we're interested. There's still a chance San Diego or Chicago or whoever else comes in and offers more money or has a better setup for him, and he says no anyway. So I absolutely believe that KDB's camp reached out to Austin, but I also believe they probably reached out to a lot of teams.
Yeah, and I believe that even the Austin having 3 DPs is not the biggest barrier. Like I think even if Austin had a spot open, the money he's going to command, given the fact that there's an international market interested in him, and the amount of money Austin's willing to pay for a single player, are probably not in line with each other.
Yeah, let's say the conspiracy comes together and we are still in play for De Bruyne. They are planning on moving Bukari to open up that spot. I know we paid a lot, like some big transfer fees, but the way Roto talked about it and the way that people were talking about the Austin FC ownership leading up to this transfer window when they spent a bunch of money, it seems to me that Roto got the green light on the transfer fees because he got fairly low salaries for all these guys. De Bruyne would be on a free, but then the salary every year that you have him is the amount that you spend on transfer fees in the last year.
Absolutely. Right. Yeah. Every time. So probably not coming to town, but I mean, I guess it's good to hear Austin connected to guys like that. And I'd expect you probably will hear more of it as Austin sort of has a relatively high profile for Major League Soccer club. And especially given Burrell's connections, that anybody who's ever been associated with Manchester City is probably going to be rumored to be connected with Austin in some way. So I think before we get into the previews, let's talk about this Alexander Svatak call up. One, I was like, Canadian Shield. This is very confusing to me.
Yeah.
But he's called up as a reserve for the Ukrainian national team in a tournament called the Canadian Shield that 4 national teams play in, Ukraine and Canada being 2 of them.
Yeah, and these games are happening in Canada. So it seems like right now it'll be kind of like last time where he's not expected to travel. Last time he was on that reserve spot, another player went down and he did end up traveling and going, like leaving Austin to go join Ukraine. If he did it this time, yeah, he would still probably, if it were for that first fixture on the 7th, he would probably miss an Austin game, but he's not as far away and it's probably much easier for him to get back for the next Austin game. There's going to be a few others we'll need to keep an eye on as this window gets closer because we've got the Gold Cup in late June. MLS is pausing for that one. So we've got a few players who could potentially be playing in that one. Before that, there is a FIFA window that MLS is not pausing for. And so there's quite a few others that are not for sure going to be gone, but a few that very well could be gone in that window. And if it's any of the center backs, then that could be a real problem for Austin.
Yeah, absolutely. Because we don't have the new. We were just talking about how we would like a center back to be one of the people that we bring in during this next window, but it will not be open yet for this time around. So this becomes a very thin lineup.
All right, should we get into our previews?
Yeah, let's do it. We'll start with Houston. This is this Wednesday night. This is again at 8 p.m. kickoff. US Open Cup round of 16. Houston gets to this matchup by beating Phoenix Rising 4-1 in the last round. It was actually tied at the end of regulation. Houston puts in 3 goals and added extra time. I think Houston they're playing Wednesday, Saturday all throughout May, the same as Austin is. So I expect we see heavy rotation from both teams. And then I guess the other thing is like Houston's been better over the last few matches than they had been early in the season. So they may be finding their form a little bit too.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think Austin, we talked about this last week where I imagine these players and the coaches want this game back against Houston after what happened away in Houston. This is going to be their chance, but the way that the best 11 has been pushed in the last couple of games, I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but it just doesn't feel like you can run that same lineup out again. And that's where it makes me a little bit more nervous about what this outcome is, because Danny Pereira is still going to be out. Mikael Dessler maybe could be back for this Wednesday one, but the way Estevez talked about it the other day, he was kind of expecting maybe not even for the Minnesota game, and it would probably be the next one. So he's a possibility, but probably not likely for the Houston game anyway. Danny's definitely not going to be back for this one. Taylor's not going to be back for this one. And so rotation means you're playing some significantly lesser players in certain positions, some inexperienced players or just some lower quality players.
Yeah, I mean, you've got the places where you have other options. You play Kolmanich at fullback, right, for one of the fullbacks. You have 3 competent center backs, so you can mix and match there. Get Hunter Obrion, and then beyond that, you're looking at Diego Rubio, or you really are like going deep into the roster for players to start games.
Yeah, playing like the midfield. Ilie's not getting any younger. Sabovic has played a lot in these last couple of games and has struggled with the heat. So do we have to see Dubrsarski start? I mean, he's been okay, but he's not inspired confidence in me that he's going to be the guy to really hold down a midfield for a full 60 to 90 minutes or maybe even 120 minutes. And then John Gallagher, like,
God bless that man.
He's played so much. We just don't have the sub. Like, you could, like, maybe you could play, I already forgot his name, Riley Thomas. You could put him in there, and I think he would be fine. But the fact that we haven't seen him in a game at all, I think probably says something. And so I don't know what you do. And like, I think there's a lot of people who want Austin to prioritize the Open Cup, but like the hand has been played for you at this point, or at least like with the way subs have been managed the last couple of games. They saw points on the table, and Nico Estevez decided to go all in on those points. He didn't get them, and so if he did get 4 or 6 points in this last week, then you could maybe say, okay, we earned those points. Let's give some guys some rest against Houston, and hopefully we can still get the result. But you didn't get those points. Does that change how you respond coming into this Houston one? And does that pay off, or does it bite you in the butt by not resting some of these guys and pushing them too hard?
Right. Good. Do you blow those guys up and then you don't have them against Minnesota, and then
or they're just too tired and you lose against Houston anyway?
Right. And then, that's not even looking at the fact that you've got Salt Lake and San Diego next week. So it's
right.
No rest for the wicked for sure for this club. So for me, like, I don't start prioritizing the Open Cup until maybe the Final 4, maybe the Final 8. You start moving players around, to prioritize those matches, and that is still dependent upon who you have available. And I think if Austin makes it through this round, then Austin has a lot more options, because guys will be getting back and getting healthy, and hopefully other players won't be going out. So I don't see a way that you start worrying about the Open Cup over the league right now.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see who runs out for this one. Anything else on that one before we move on?
No, man. Let's roll into Saturday then, because that's sort of the connection.
I did want to mention one thing. I had some folks from La Murga and from Los Verdes reach out, and they're trying to get a movement going for Wednesday to black out Q2. Did you see these social media posts about this?
I did, and I saw one from Moon Tower Soccer too. So good job.
Yeah, so I think the aim here is to bring an intimidating atmosphere to our Open Cup rivalry match. So if you want to participate in that, you can check out La Murga, Los Verdes social media, but essentially wear black is what they're asking.
Yep. Everybody's got black in their closet. It shouldn't be that hard.
I feel like most Austin FC merch for the first 2 years was only black anyway.
Was mostly black, true. Yeah, that's true. You probably have black Austin FC stuff in your closet. Yeah, so on the weekend, Minnesota United on the road. It's just been a couple weeks since Minnesota blew out Austin in Austin, 3-0. Austin started off pretty decent on the road this year. They've lost their last 3 matches. Minnesota currently sits second in the West. Kip Keller is out injured for this one, so we will not get to see him play for Minnesota.
I don't know that we would have saw him play anyway.
Well, I know they only had like 2 guys hurt, so it was he stood out on the injury list. That he's not available. But I mean, this one, this is one where not that I want to do 2 shows in a week, but I feel like I would have a way better ability to preview this match if it came Thursday or Friday, with the context of knowing what happens Wednesday. And maybe this is a plug to listen to Swoon Tower Soccer, given that they will probably have that context when they record their show this week. But it's another one that looks tough. It's another one that when you leave points against a team like Atlanta, you're going to have to find a way to pick them up in a hard place like Minnesota on the road.
Yeah, and Minnesota is a team who, like you said, doesn't have many injuries right now. They've been able to rotate fairly well and get some guys some rest. I think in their Open Cup match, they did like 10 short-term loan call-ups from their second team. And they didn't start all of them, but I think there was maybe no first-team players on the bench, or maybe 1 or 2, and then several of those second-team guys in the starting 11. So when they've had such a good start and have been in such good form, I think they feel like they can afford to do that a bit more. And I think they ended up winning that game anyway. So they have been able to rest, have been able to rotate, and are looking really dangerous right now. So again, this is MLS. Never bet MLS. If Austin can play as well as they did against Vancouver the other day, they're going to have a chance in this game. Like, I don't doubt that, but they can't play like they did away in Vancouver, or this Minnesota team might put 5 on them.
Or they can't play like they did at home against Minnesota. They've got to find a way to different way to do it. Yeah, you're right though, man. It's MLS. Anything can happen on any given night, and we've had plenty of experience for good and bad where it seemed like something was a foregone conclusion, and it didn't happen. You know, we had talked about Los Verdes watch parties for away matches over a few weeks, and they've kind of put a pause on that. But it's kind of cool because what you could do instead is go find people who live close to you who are Austin FC fans, who are probably going through something emotional right now with this team and need the support of other people who know and care. And so Los Verdes has introduced the Full 90 Club, which is a group of bars and restaurants around Austin to show the matches with the sound on. So it includes the Rutorium, Hop Squad, Lester Pearl East and South, Meanwhile, and Mags and Cedar Park. Basically anywhere in the city that you want to go watch soccer, you can find a group of Austin FC fans watching it together. And you can either share the joy or the pain alongside your fellow Verdes.
Yeah, and I appreciate Los Verdes doing this, because how many times have you heard someone talk about the Austin FC Pub Club,
Totally.
which was supposed to be this idea, a network of bars across the city that have agreed to play the games, to put sound on. I've heard so many examples of people saw that being promoted, went to a place that Austin FC said agreed to have the game on, and got there and either didn't have it on, or refused to play sound, or just didn't have a very good time and didn't get the atmosphere they were looking for. This is a much smaller list with places that LV has done events with before, and so have a relationship there. And so this is a really cool resource to find one of a handful of places that are kind of scattered throughout the city to go and get a good atmosphere to watch an away match. All right. Anything else, Jeremiah, before we wrap up?
No, let's wrap this one up and I guess get ready for the grind of another week.
Yeah, I can't believe we have to go back to Q2. I mean, I'm excited about it, but it's hard on my old body and on my wallet and on my work life. So hopefully we get a reward with a win and moving on to the next round of the Open Cup. We'd like to remind you to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Come find us on the internet. Sign up for the Patreon. I think that's all. Thanks so much for listening. Next week, we'll be back to review the Houston and Minnesota matches, and then back at it again with Too Much Soccer to preview the RSL and San Diego matches, and then cover what other whatever other Austin FC news comes our way. Until then, I'm Landon Cottom.
I'm Jeremiah Bentley.
We'll catch you next time.
When no one is around.
Think for nothing, you never.
La gente.
Oh my God.
Zula Chupa Boom sauce.
Yeah.